What's up everybody, welcome to Axel's Wrestling Review. Yes, I've been saying it for ages, I was going to change the name of the show, I have changed it a bit more, well obviously wrestling related, so Axel's Wrestling Review is the new name of the show. The episode numbers will continue in sequence from when I was calling the show Axel's Analysis, but Axel's Wrestling Review is the new name of the show. As always, I'm your host Axel Mulligan. I'm ditching all the tags, the Indian Informer, the NXT Nerd. It's just a wrestling show now. All kinds of wrestling, you know. I've covered TNA. We're talking a little bit about Raw. I've not watched SmackDown yet. Obviously, I'll be mainly covering NXT and Ring of Honor, as I have been doing as of late. Well, obviously, I've been covering NXT since day one. But as of late, obviously, I've been covering Ring of Honor, so I'll be sticking to Ring of Honor as well. I'll be talking a little bit about Raw as well. I watched Raw this week. It was a very good show. Not a go-home show for the Royal Rumble pay-per-view, but it was a very good show nonetheless. The two things that really pissed me off about it, though, as always, there is something that's going to piss me off about Raw. Obviously, was they didn't include Hulk Hogan in the NWO segment, which Hogan was the he was the part that made the NWO when they first came together in WCW. You know, you had the Outsiders. They teased that there was a third member for quite a while, and then obviously, you know, Hogan was that third member, and that made the NWO the NWO. Why he wasn't involved in the segment, I don't know. They had X-Pac, you know, he was involved in both incarnations of the NWO, in WCW and in WWE. Hogan needed to be there for me, but that's just my opinion, and probably the opinion of a few other people as well who were watching Raw. And the other thing that pissed me off actually was it also involved in that segment the Ascension. They had this obviously the confrontation with the legends, you know, JBL and Ron Simmons sort of reunited the APA for one night, the Outlaws, the NWO, so on and so forth. Yet there's not been, they've had a 2 or 3 week build saying we're better than this team, we're better than that team, we're better than the other team. I just think back to when they did it with Rob Conway back in, I believe it was in 2005. He was trash talking legends for months, and the same with Heath Slater. He was beating legends, he was losing to legends, he was fighting legends for months, and those two got the right payoff. This isn't going to be the right payoff for me, but as I said, it was a good show, Raw on the whole, but I'm always going to have my gripes. If you want to listen to a full Raw review, make sure you check out Tim Vicious's Axel's Analysis, Tim Vicious his Vicious Rants show on YouTube, and make sure you check out the Sunday Segway podcast as well. Right, so NXT this week, very good show. I thought it was a good week for WWE on the whole. I have to say, I've not seen SmackDown just yet, but from what I can gather, SmackDown was fairly good. So, you know, it's a good week for the WWE on the whole. NXT, we had the commentary team of Brennan, Albert and Graves. Neither here nor there, but that's another story. The in-ring quality was good enough to get the show over. Regal announced the next TakeOver event. This was to start the show back in his office. He announced that the next TakeOver event was set for February 11th. And he says, starting on the show, we'll have a number one contenders tournament between 8 different guys, and also Charlotte will defend the NXT Women's Championship against Sasha Banks, which I kind of predicted last week, but there we go. The first match didn't actually get underway. It was Sami Zayn versus Ty Dillinger. Zayn basically ran to the ring and beat the piss out of Ty Dillinger. He kicked him out of the ring, called out Kevin Owens, and this was good because Sami was really he was emotional in an angry way, and we don't see that from Sami Zayn, but it was great to see because Sami's a very happy-go-lucky kind of guy generally, and he really got emotionally pissed off And that's the kind of Sami Zayn we all want to see. You know, we all want to see Sami Zayn showing some emotion and showing some passion. As much as he does show it in the ring, his promos don't always show that, you know. And this was the one that, for me, showed that, you know, he's finally had a fire lit under his ass. And, you know, he calls out Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens doesn't come out. We get William Regal instead. And he told him, you know, you can't act like that. And he was almost like he was a discipliner. He was disciplining his son, saying, "Look, Sami, you can't do that. You know, it's not the way to behave." But Zayn tells Regal, you know, he's not wrestling unless he's wrestling against Kevin Owens. And Regal says that Owens hasn't earned an NXT Championship match. So Zayn says, "I don't care. Don't make it an NXT Championship match. Make it a non-title match. I just want to wrestle Kevin Owens." So Regal makes the match for February 11th at NXT Takeover, and the promo, it lasted all of 4 or 5 minutes, and it was short, sweet, to the point. And it just got over the main event. That was all they needed to do. Bang, 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 done. And we'll move on to the next segment. And it was brilliant how it was done. It wasn't rushed, and it was something that didn't need to be dragged out like we quite often see on Raw and SmackDown. So yeah, the match is set. We all knew it was coming. The match is set. NXT Takeover 11th of February. The renewal of the rival between El Generico and Kevin Steen, now known as Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. First match that actually did get underway the night was Finn Balor versus Curtis Axel, and I thought this was a good solid match. It was a first round match in the NXT Championship #1 Contenders Tournament, and there were no real sort of high spots in the match. But you know, as I say, it was a good match. Balor picked up the win, which was expected, really, I suppose, with a double foot stomp from the top rope. But I do sort of wonder where they're going to go with Curtis Axel now, because he's been back in NXT for 2 matches. He's lost them both, and I think I said it last week or the week before. I think the only way they can go with him down in NXT now is doing the opposite. What they did with Tyson Kidd, where Tyson Kidd turned heel. I think they've got to turn Curtis Axel face, because that will get him over. It'll get him relevant again. You know, just freshen him up. You know, he was a face when he was Michael McGillicuddy last time down in NXT, and then he got called up as Curtis Axel, and he had a good little run to start with. To be fair, you know, obviously they must think very highly of him, because he was the Intercontinental Champion. He previously, in his previous main roster run, he was the WWE Tag Team Champion along with David Otunga. But you know, he's beaten guys like Triple H and John Cena previously on the main roster, so you know, they've obviously got some sort of backing behind him. Maybe that's because of the lineage of his family. You know, Kurt Hennig, his father, Larry Hennig, his grandfather, but they've got to have some sort of faith in him, I think, and putting him back down to NXT to sort of rebuild and rejuvenate himself, that shows that they are going to back this guy, and that they do consider him to have a future in the company. But then on the flip side of that, looking at Finn Balor, you know, obviously he advances in the tournament now. He'll face the winner of either Tyler Breeze and Hideo Itami, which was the main event in this show. The 2 other first round matches, because we didn't see the bracket, we didn't see the table of matches until now. The other matches were Adrian Neville versus Tyson Kidd and Baron Corbin versus Bull Dempsey, which I don't think it warranted a spot in the tournament, but I'm sure it'll serve a purpose. Charlotte versus Sasha Banks for the NXT Women's Championship is up next. It's only a short match, but it is always good to see a championship match, you know, as long as they don't put one on each show, because you don't need one on each show, but we have seen one now for the last three or four weeks, a championship match. But as long as we get one every so often, you know, maybe every 3 weeks or so, as I say, we don't need one every week, but some form of championship match maybe every 2 or 3 weeks or so, just to keep the titles relevant, if anything, because you do sometimes find that titles aren't defended often enough. well, the WWE World Heavyweight Championship isn't defended often enough, in my opinion. You know, you've got the tag titles, which are defended all the time, the Intercontinental Championship, which is defended all the time. I would say as well the Divas title should be defended more, and the US title should be defended more on the main roster. But that's for guys like Kinney, Shugs, Tim, James, so on and so forth, for those guys to discuss on their podcasts. But down in NXT, you know, I think if there's at least one championship match every 2 or 3 weeks, it will get by, and it will do that part of the company the world of good. This match, again, as I said, didn't last very long. It ended. Becky Lynch got involved. She started beating on Charlotte. Basically, Sasha was a bit pissed off to begin with, but then she joined in on the beatdown. And then Bayley made the save. She didn't actually get physically involved with either Sasha or Becky Lynch, but she sort of scared them off, so to speak. Charlotte's recovering from the beatdown. The referee has the belt in his hands, and Bayley takes the belt from the referee and she starts eyeballing it. She's like looking at it and looking at it and looking at it, and Charlotte's like, Bayley, 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 because she wants her belt back. So she essentially snatches the belt from Bayley, and that sort of ticks, you know, something clicks in Bayley's mind, and you could just see from the look on her face that she's pissed off. You know, obviously her friend's snatching something from her. Alright, it's not Bayley's property, but it's still not polite to snatch something now, is it? So Charlotte's got her championship. Bayley's directly behind her. She turns her around, hits the Bayley to belly, and the crowd popped like you wouldn't fucking believe. It was probably the biggest pop of the night. I thought it was cool to see a new side of Bayley. You know, it's not, obviously it's not a heel turn. It's just a statement. It's to say, I want that NXT Women's Championship. Regal came out next, and he said, obviously, you know, there's a lot of unfinished business between the four of them, and he made a fatal 4-way match for the NXT Women's Championship at NXT TakeOver on the 11th of February. So that show's starting to build up quite nicely now as well. I think it could be a way, just with them having the fatal 4-way, I think it could be a way for them to take the title off of Charlotte to get her up onto the main roster, but without her being pinned. Personally, I'd love to see Sasha win the belt. I think she deserves it more than pretty much everybody else in NXT. You know, that's not a slight to either Bayley or Becky Lynch, but we haven't seen enough of Becky, I don't think. And Bayley, I wouldn't be upset if Bayley won the title, don't get me wrong, but I just think that Sasha deserves it that little bit more. But where they go with it, obviously, it's interesting to see, because Charlotte's on the cusp of being called up, and how we saw it with Paige last year is obviously when she won the Divas Championship on the main roster, they didn't want her having both championships for whatever reason. Why they couldn't just let her sort of lose it with a bit of dignity, I don't know, but it was a JBL decision on the screen, of course. Personally, I wouldn't mind seeing Sasha win the belt, as I say, just as a way to get the belt off of Charlotte if she's moving up. Maybe if she were to pin Becky Lynch, Becky turn face, but then as well, you know, they need to bring more divas onto the roster, because we've only got half a dozen at the moment. I've talked about this in previous weeks, so I shan't go too much over the overall ground. But personally, Sasha for me is the one that's got to win the belt, as I've just said about half a dozen times. So I'll leave it at that and move on to the next match, the Vaudevillains versus the team that I called last week the Outback Cowboys, Buddy Murphy and Wesley Blake. Another solid match. Again, it didn't seem too rushed, and it didn't seem off pace or anything like that. I thought it was very well put together, and the surprise was that Murphy and Blake picked up the win. Blake and English were legal in the ring. English got caught up in the ropes. I think he was sort of looking for an O'Connor roll on Blake, and as he sort of ran into the ropes, his head went through, and Murphy caught him from the outside of the ring with a kick to the head, and Blake managed to sort of catch him with a pinning combination to pick up the win. Post-match, there was like a little backstage segment afterwards. I don't know who the guy's name was. It was like a new interview, but he didn't say his name. Nobody said what his name was. The Outback Cowboys, they challenged Calista Cara to a championship match next week. which we found out later in the show that Kalisto Coward accepted the challenge. So that's about 4 or 5 weeks in a row now, after I just said, you know, we don't need championship matches every week. This is about 4 or 5 weeks in a row now we'll have had a championship match. But it's a bit of a random one, I thought. I'll take it, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of Murphy and Blake. I think that they're a fun team to watch. They've got good chemistry in the ring, and they are just one of those WWE thrown together tag teams. But I think that they're making something really good of it. Kind of like Cesaro and Tyson Kidd on the main roster, but as I say, I try not to talk too much about the main roster, leave that for the guys who do cover the main roster. But you know, obviously you can tell they've been working down in the performance centre and honing their craft, as they say. And you know, I think they've done really well. And I'm just hoping that they don't get broken up unnecessarily, as WWE tends to do with tag teams. Kind of like how they broke up the Legionnaires. You know, I didn't think that there was much need to break them up. I think Sylvester should have taken the haircut personally, and there wasn't much of a fallout of it between Sylvester and Marcus, but that's another story, obviously. But I do think that Murphy and Blake have got a bright future as a tag team, and I do hope that the WWE keeps them together, because they are looking good. You know, they've got this championship opportunity next week, so we'll see how they get on against Kalisto Coward, the current NXT Tag Team Champions. Main event time, Tyler Breeze versus Hideo Itami. I wouldn't say by far the match of the night, but it was the match of the night. Tyler's been a bit quiet as of late, and he definitely needed this match to get him back in, get him back on track, I suppose. Because, as I say, he's not been around for as constantly as he was for a little while. Corey Graves keeps saying that he's out sort of with, you know, real estate and things like that, trying to find a new home in every fucking seasonal residence area or whatever. I don't understand all that kind of crap, but unfortunately though for Breeze, it was his performance that got him back on track and not the result of the match. Hideo picked up the win. Breeze was sort of in control, but then Hideo came back with a flurry of kicks, and he hit the one-legged running drop kick to the face. 1, 2, 3, and the first semi-final match is now set, and this is going to be a hashtag Randy Marsh moment, as me and Tim like to call it. You've got Finn Balor versus Hideo Itami, the former tag team partners, facing off against one another next week. Sorry, not next week. I think that'll be in 2 weeks' time. And I can't even come to getting the words to describe how awesome that match is probably going to be. It's probably a dream match for the IWC, definitely a dream match for myself. You know, I've only really seen them both in NXT. I've not seen much of their stuff outside of NXT, but from what I have seen, holy shit. Whether these two have faced each other or not in the past, I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. I'm pretty sure everybody else is fucking looking forward to it as well. As I say, it's going to be a hashtag Randy Marsh moment. Overall rating of the show, I've given it 7 out of 10. I've written down here on my notes, it's a very good, realistic show. And by realistic, I mean, like, we had the situation with Bayley wanting the women's championship rather, and basically taking it to Charlotte, saying, right, you're going to snatch that off of me, I'm going to show you what I'm made of, and I'm going to take your women's championship. And that was the statement that she put down. As well, I thought the finish for Hideo versus Tyler Breeze seemed realistic in a way, because it kind of took me back to I've seen like a lot of old Four Horsemen matches, and you know, Tully Blanchard could just pick up a win with any kind of move really, and it almost seemed like that with this match. I can't remember seeing Hideo win with that move before. I know he's definitely used it, but if he has one with it, somebody please do correct me, obviously. But it just seemed like a move that you didn't expect him to win with, and that's what sort of seemed quite realistic to me, is that he can win with any kind of move. As I say, similar to Tully Blanchard. I mean, he used that the slingshot suplex, which kind of seemed like an ordinary move to me, but obviously it was one of his main moves. He won a lot of matches with it. That kind of ilk, I'm sort of putting that in. So next week we've got Baron Corbin versus Bull Dempsey Part 2, Adrian Neville versus Tyson Kidd Part 137, and the Outback Cowboys versus Kalisto Cara for the NXT Tag Team Championship. And also, it was announced on the show, we will have the contract signed in between, with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn for their match at NXT Takeover. I'd imagine it's going to end up being like most fucking, most contract signings, where it's just going to break out into a fucking fight, basically. But certainly something to look forward to. And, as I said, giving this show a 7 out of 10, I think next week's show could be even better. But we'll see when it comes to it. We'll see in 7 days' time. The review of Honor. As I said, been reviewing Ring of Honor for the last few weeks. Just because the name of the show's changed doesn't mean the concept of the show's going to change. Ring of Honor, hell of a show, I thought, really. As always, they're just consistent. They're just consistent with their in-ring, their in-ring quality. They've got probably the strongest wrestling roster in the world at the moment. And the first match, Cedric Alexander versus Frankie Kazarian, was just a very good example of that. It was a great way to kick off a wrestling TV show. Daniels was on commentary, and he was as entertaining and as insightful as what you'd expect him to have been, really sort of building up the potential of Cedric Alexander, how he became a part of their team at Final Battle, and sort of the advice that they've been giving him over the last few weeks. And that was sort of quite a cool touch, I thought, from Daniels, because he's a ring general, he's a ring master. In my opinion, one of the best wrestlers in the world today, probably the greatest wrestler currently working to have never won a major world championship or any world championship. Never been a Ring of Honor world champion. He never won the TNA world championship. Never won the NWA world heavyweight championship. Obviously, he's never worked in WWE either. Unfortunately for Cedric, his losing streak continued in this match. He basically looked to hit a springboard clothesline, and as he came down, Francois caught him with like a cutter, sort of an RKO type thing. Think of how CM Punk and Randy Orton finished in their WrestleMania match. I forget which WrestleMania that was at. That might have been about 23 or 24. But just think how that match ended. And this is what happened here, basically. He caught him with a cutter and followed it up with the Unprettier. I don't know what he calls the Unprettier, but I know it's the Unprettier from Christian's days of using it. So Franklin picked up the win. But what I'm wondering is, I put it out on Twitter. I can't remember if I put it out on Twitter, actually. I know I definitely put it out on Facebook and didn't get any response to it. But is it possible that Cedric Alexander could turn heel? He's not picking up wins, and he's shown a bit of a frustrated side in recent weeks. And he's been quite vicious as of late as well. You think back to the no DQ match that he had with Tommaso Ciampa, probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago on TV, and it could be a heel turn. Could be the move could be what moves him forward in Ring of Honor and in wrestling in general, really, because if you can be versatile switching between heel and face, he's a brilliant babyface, don't get me wrong, but if you can be versatile, be a good heel and a good face, you're only destined for greatness. I think personally he could be a brilliant heel. Maybe something in the Michael Elgin playbook as a heel. Elgin's probably one of the best heels that Ring of Honor's got right now, and I think that Cedric Alexander could end up being that kind of heel, and a very good one. But we'll see what they do with it. It's an exciting time to be a Ring of Honor fan, really. Everything's picking up, everything's changing. The fans are loving it. The way the fans reacted in Nashville for these TV tapings was just phenomenal. They just react to everything, so well educated, and they really know what they like, and they know what they don't like as well, which is a good thing. The next match was Top Prospect Tournament match, Donovan Dijak versus Jake Dirden. And before I talk about the match, a big thank you to Donovan Dijak. He has liked the Axel's Analysis Facebook page. So a big thank you to you, Donovan Dijak. Obviously, The name would be changing now though to Axel's Wrestling Review. But this was a match, it was two guys at least 6'7" each in height. And the talking point, aside from the result, the talking point was the decade they came out to ringside. Well, not really to ringside, I suppose. They were sort of halfway up the ramp. But I'm just wondering, they're potentially looking at their next young boy. They seem quite interested in Jake Dirden. But unfortunately for Jake, he didn't pick up the win. He did have the win, within his grasp. But instead of covering Dijak when he had the chance to, he uses a spike. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's like a Umaga, the Samoan spike. I can't remember exactly what Jake Dirden calls it now. But he had his chance, and instead of going for a cover, he looked to hit the spike. Dijak countered that, hit his finisher, Feast Your Eyes, which is kind of like a modified GTS, to pick up the win to advance to the next round of the tournament. He'll face either Ashley Six or Dalton Castle in the semi-final. Again, two guys I've not seen, so I don't really know what to expect, but something definitely to look forward to, as I always say. If you've not seen a wrestler before and they're wrestling for a company like Ring of Honor, you're likely to get a pleasant surprise, because Ring of Honor don't just pick up any old talent. They pick the best talent that they can. So Ashley Six versus Dalton Castle. I'm not sure if that match will be next week or the following week, but it's definitely, I'm looking forward to it. I love the Top Prospect tournament. I've followed it. I believe it was the year that Matt Taven won it, and I thought it was fucking brilliant. I loved the concept of it. I loved the fact that you get to come across new wrestlers. Just you can't fault what Ring of Honor do for wrestling. As much as some people will try to, you cannot fault their commitment to professional wrestling. This was my favourite part of the show now. The debut in Ring of Honor of Alberto El Patron. I said last week that he was facing Christopher Daniels this week. I fucked up. He's not facing Daniels. He's just sort of introducing himself to the audience. Kevin Kelly, he's in the ring. He brings him out. And it got a huge fucking pop, basically, and it was one of the best pops I'd heard from a crowd in, well, this kind of crowd anyway, in a long time. And to be fair to Alberto, of course he savoured the moment, and he milked the crowd's applause, and rightly so. He's taken a lot of shit from a lot of people in recent months. Nobody more so than people in the WWE. Obviously, he was told at one stage he wasn't allowed to wrestle in the United States for 4 months. Fuck you, Alberto's here in Ring of Honor. He's worked House of Hardcore as well, he's working for Lucha Underground as well. There's one thing actually I'm not sure about. He's signed a Lucha Underground contract, but I don't know if that prevents him from working with Ring of Honor. That's something I'm not sure about. I've asked questions to people who might be in the know, and nobody's given me a straight, yes or no answer, so to speak. Can he work in Ring of Honor? So if anybody does know, just let me know, because I'm really interested. I'd love to see this guy working in Ring of Honor for years to come. I think he is that fucking good. And Ring of Honor, as I said, they only get the best talent available, and Alberto El Patron is certainly one of the best talents out there available to work for Ring of Honor. So if he can continue working for Ring of Honor, you got to fucking tune in, basically. He puts over Ring of Honor as the company, as I say, they pick out the best wrestlers, and he builds up his match with Christopher Daniels next week, which for me is a dream fucking match, and that is going to be another hashtag Randy Marsh moment. He then says that he wants to go after the Ring of Honor World Championship, as anybody in any company wants to, everybody wants to be the world champion. So he invites Jay Briscoe to come down to the ring. But instead of Jay Briscoe, he got the other Jay Lethal, instead with Truth Martini. Truth and Lethal talk about how Lethal was the #1 guy in Ring of Honor as the World Television Champion. Basically says that the TV title is bigger than the World title. And Lethal says he feels disrespected and demands an apology. El Patron says that in any company, it doesn't matter what company it is, the World Champion is the #1 guy, and the World Championship is the #1 championship. And then he offers to fight Lethal, and both men, they look ready to go until Truth steps in and basically stops the fight, or the potential fight. House of Truth leave the ring. But it is a match I see happening. but I don't want Alberto to pick up the television championship, and that's not a disrespect to the television championship. It's not a disrespect to Alberto El Patron either. It's a case of there are other guys who deserve it more than Alberto, because they have been there busting their ass in that division for the last year since Jay Lethal's won the championship, give or take a few months. And I'd much prefer to see, you know, maybe someone like an ACH pick up the championship, or Cedric Alexander. I don't know. It's just two names who I think are deserving of the World Television Championship. It's one of the, I can see it happening at the 13th anniversary, and I don't want it to, because I want Alberto to face AJ Styles. I'd rather see it on TV as a non-title match, but I think they're going to go the other way with it now after looking at this promo. Yeah, as I say, I'd rather see the belt put on ACH or Cedric or anybody but Alberto, really. Somebody who's been with the company for a while and has built up that kind of potential rivalry with Jay Lethal, and not somebody who's just walked into the company. As I say, that's not a disrespect to the TV title, that's not a disrespect to Jay Lethal, it's not a disrespect to Alberto El Patron. That's just my opinion. Nigel McGuinness comes out next to make an announcement. He says that there was no winner last week in the main event between Elgin, Ciampa and Hansen. So, you know, there's no definitive winner, so there's no definitive number one contender to the World Championship. He calls Jay Briscoe out, who asks Nigel to make the main event for the 13th anniversary of four-way between himself, Elgin, Ciampa and Hansen, and he tells Nigel to go away and think about it. But what Jay Briscoe didn't take into account is his match next is for the World Championship versus Matt Taven. And this was quite a fun match, I thought. Bent and Maria were at ringside, and, you know, of course they got involved on more than one occasion. There was an occasion where Bennett super kicked Briscoe, you know, just getting involved with the usual Kingdom tactics, really. But, you know, as I'm sure everybody predicted, Jay Briscoe picked up the win to retain the World Championship. He hit the J Driller. Post-match, Bennett came in with the title of love, and he took out Briscoe, started beating on him. Maria held the championship above Briscoe's head, above Briscoe's body on the floor, on the canvas, and basically, you know, started talking smack to him, but, you know, saying he's not a man. You know, if he wants his title, come and get it. But he's not a man. He's not mad enough to go and get it. So as they're talking smack, Mark Briscoe makes his way down to the ring and runs the Kingdom out, and lays down a challenge for next week to open the show with Briscoes versus the Kingdom. So if you want a tag team match to open up a Ring of Honor show, the Briscoes versus the Kingdom, holy shit, you know, that's pay-per-view quality right there. Not only that, next week obviously as well, as I say, another pay-per-view quality match, Alberto El Patron versus Christopher Daniels. Ring of Honor just seems to like giving us pay-per-view quality matches on TV. You don't get that with WWE. Hell, the fucking WWE champion doesn't even fucking or doesn't even wrestle on TV. Not in fucking Ring of Honor. They won't be having none of that. Bringing back the Grappling Greats this week. I put it out there on Twitter earlier today. This week I'm covering Harley Race. For me, one of the all-time greatest wrestlers. It's a section that I'm not. I was doing it on a weekly basis, and then I just thought a weekly basis is probably too often. So what I'm going to be looking to do is either do it on every 2 weeks or once every 4 weeks. I'm not too sure. I'm not quite decided on that yet, but there's a lot of changes happening with the show. I've spoken to a few people about it. Spoke to Vicky Earls about it last night. Shout out to the Irish Commodity. Spoke to her about it last night. Basically, you know, I said change the name of the show, which I've already done. Axel's Wrestling Review. There's my cheap plug. Also, I'll be changing sort of presentation of the show, how that's going to be done. So stay tuned for that. Just different little aspects of the show that I'm looking to change, basically for promotional reasons, I suppose. You know, just wondering if these sort of things will sort of make more people interested in the show. Interest seems to have died down recently, probably because of my rambling and mumbling on about shit that's, you know, probably nobody gives a fuck about, but I don't care, I care about it. So as I say, this week's Grappling Great, Harley Race. He's born Harley Leyland Race. I actually thought Harley Race was a ring name, but it's not. He's born on April 11th, 1943 in Quitman, Missouri. He was a fan of wrestling as a child. After overcoming polio, he started training under Stanislaus and Vladek Sabisco. He's basically training on a farm with them. He was expelled from high school after getting into a fight with another student. That wasn't what got him expelled. His principal kneed Harley in the back of the head to break up the fight, so Harley attacked him. Well, fair fucking play, I would have done the same thing. He got his first break with a promoter called Gust Karras in St. Joseph, Missouri, initially doing like odd jobs. Even one of them was chauffeuring around an £800 wrestler. He did eventually get his chance to wrestle. At the age of 18, he moved to Nashville, where he used the name Jack Long, and him and his kayfabe brother John won the Southern Tag Team Championship. But soon after that, Harley and his pregnant wife, his first wife Vivian, were involved in a car accident. Vivian died instantly in the accident, and Harley almost lost a leg, but they were only married for around about a month. Obviously quite a sad moment there. But basically, Race survived the potential amputation of a leg thanks to Gust Karras, who basically said, "You'll amputate that leg over my dead body." So thank you to Gust Karras for stepping in and intervening so that Harley, you know, could enjoy a long and successful career after that, obviously. He joined the WWF in 1963, wrestling under the name The Great Mortimer. So obviously it's not just in this day and age that WWE give their wrestlers shit names. In 1964 he wrestled for the Funks promotion in Amarillo, Texas under his own name, and basically his father told him not to work to make somebody else's name famous, and after that moment he never wrestled under another name again, and he was wrestling for another 28 years after this. He joined the AWA, formed a tag team with Larry Hennig, calling themselves Handsome Harley Race and Pretty Boy Larry Hennig, and in 1965 they defeated Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher to become the AWA World Tag Team Champions, and in total they won the AWA World Tag Team Championship on 3 separate occasions. But you know, it came to a stage where Harley wanted to pursue a singles career, so he left the AWA in the early 1970s to join the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance. And 3 years later he faced Dory Funk Jr. in Kansas City, Kansas, and in a complete upset, Race defeated the NWA World Champion to end Funk's 4.5 year reign as champion. Race's reign only lasted for 57 days. He lost the belt to Jack Briscoe in Houston, Texas. There was a bit of controversy surrounding it, whereby Jack Briscoe was supposed to win the belt from Dory Funk Jr. However, Dory Funk Sr. got involved and basically said that his son had been involved in an automobile accident and wasn't able to fight Jack. I don't quite understand though how it worked out that Race would beat beat Funk for the title when Briscoe was still available to defeat him, but my mind is boggled. After he lost the belt to Jack Briscoe, and after collecting several regional championships over the next few years, Harley Race finally regained the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, defeating Terry Funk this time for the NWA World Heavyweight title. The Funks are the only brothers to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, and Harley Race defeated them both. In all, Harley Race won 8 NWA World Championships, which is, it puts him number 2 in the list behind Ric Flair, who won 10 World Championships in the NWA. Harley signed back with the WWF in 1986, and basically they didn't at the time acknowledge that wrestlers had worked for other companies. You know, they made sure that the fans thought that they were new to the sport, and to get over Harley as a legitimate wrestler and a top guy. They had him win the King of the Ring tournament, and he began to refer to himself as King Harley Race. Before that, he went back to Handsome Harley Race, but he called himself King Harley Race. During his WWF run, he feuded with future Hall of Famers Hulk Hogan, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and the Junkyard Dog. Race eventually retired from the business in 1995 when he was working in WCW as a manager. He basically got involved in a second automobile accident, and it meant that he had to just completely step away from wrestling altogether. And Harley's been inducted into the following Hall of Fames: the WWE Hall of Fame in 2004, the NWA Hall of Fame in 2005, Missouri Sports Hall of Fame in 2013, Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2004, St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2007, the WCW Hall of Fame in 1994, and the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame in 1996. As I say, Race is an 8-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion, only second in the list behind Ric Flair, who has 10 rings. So there you go, just a background on Harley Race. As I say, it's a section that I'll be trying to do it maybe every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. As I say, I'm not quite decided on that yet, but when I am decided, obviously anybody who follows the Facebook page and the Twitter page will be the first people to know. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. As always, I'm not going to change the concept of the shout-outs. They'll all be in the notes below. Make sure you check out, guys like Tim, Sunday Segway, James, so on and so forth. As I say, all the information will be in the notes below. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back next week again reviewing NXT and reviewing Ring of Honor on Axel's Wrestling Review.